Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining the Ark Teacher Training webinar today. I will just be running through kind of all the things that we're going to be covering, but I'm looking forward to telling you a little bit more about Ark. As well, we also have Tania, who is one of our trainees here. So I'm just going to run through a little bit of information about Ark Teacher Training, and then we're going to have kind of a Q&A with Tania. So you'll see in your kind of panel along the bottom, there's a section there for questions. So if you do have any questions for Tania that you think of while I'm talking, or whilst we start the Q&A, then you can feel free to pop the questions in there and we'll get round to answering those at the end. So that can be from anything from starting to train to teach, the program, the different options, different routes. So you can pop all your questions in there. But otherwise, yes, thank you very much for joining us today. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to cover all about Ark Teacher Training, the eligibility. So there's certain things that you have to teach in the UK. A little bit about the funding, because sometimes it can be a bit confusing. A few top tips for an application, and then you'll hear from Tania, one of our trainees as well. So these are the things that we're going to cover in kind of the next 45 minutes or so. So I will just start with telling you a little bit about who Ark are and who I am. So my name is Laura Nelson. I work in the recruitment team within Ark Teacher Training. So we are a charity, and we run a teacher training provider, a teacher training program even. So in the UK, kind of the strongest predictor of how a child will do at school is still what their parents do for a living. And those without good GCSE results are 27 times more likely to be unemployed. So we're an education charity that exists to make sure that all children, regardless of their background, have the access to a great education and real choices in life, whether that's going on to university, apprenticeships, straight into the working world. We are there to make sure that every student succeeds, which is why the majority of our schools are based in quite lower socioeconomic areas around the UK. With that, we have some great news to celebrate. So as I said, we have a network of kind of 38 schools, and we want to give every pupil excellent education and real choices in life. And we know that the best way to do that is to make sure that they've got excellent teachers in front of their classrooms, teaching them the lessons and the content that they need to, which is why Ark Teacher Training was created. We also have some fantastic news to share as of last week, in that we received an outstanding grade from Ofsted. So they said that it's an exceptionally well planned and delivered programme that really places our trainees in kind of the very best position to be successful in their future careers. So we were graded outstanding in 2017 by Ofsted, and we've now retained our outstanding grade, which is really impressive. I think only 3 or 4 teacher training providers have kind of kept their outstanding grade once they've been revisited by Ofsted. So it's something that we're really, really proud of, and wanted to share with you. And it just goes to show that we are really focused on making sure that our teachers are excellent, they get excellent support on the programme, and that they're doing the best, not just for themselves, but also for our students as well, because we have around about 28,000 students based in our schools. With that, we are based in London, Birmingham, Portsmouth and Hastings. So those are the 4 areas that we work with, and that's primary and secondary school as well. Now, if you want to become a trainee teacher, if you want to become a teacher in the UK, there are certain things that you have to have. So these are set by the Department for Education, so they're not kind of Ark specific. It's any teacher training provider. You will have to have kind of these criteria. So the first one is that you'll have to have an undergraduate degree with honours. With that, I'm going to talk about funding a little bit later, but to qualify for the funding that is available from the government, so the bursaries that you can get, you usually have to have a 2-2 or above. If you studied outside of the UK, then that's fantastic. We'd still love you to apply for the programme, but you will just need to speak to ENIC, which are a body of, or an organisation that will confirm that the degree that you studied outside the UK is equivalent to a undergraduate degree with honours in the UK. And that's just because it's a Department for Education requirement that you have to have a degree with honours. So they just need to confirm that the degree you have is equivalent to one in the UK. The same with your GCSE, so you have to have your GCSE grade C in English language and maths at C grade or above, or that's the 4 for the new system. If you want to teach primary, then you also have to have science as well, so that can be any one science. If you've got more, great, but you only need the one. And again, if you did study outside the UK, you would just need to send your certificates to ENIC, and they would just send you it's called a statement of comparability, but it's basically a certificate that says that it's equivalent to studying GCSE C grade in the UK. Then you have to have the right to live and work in the UK for the duration of the programme, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And you can't already be a qualified teacher as well. So if you're already a qualified teacher, then you don't need to do a teacher training programme because you're already qualified. So congratulations. Then with the next slide, so we've got the Ark Teacher Training program here and what that means. So with the Ark Teacher Training program, you would be based in one of our schools, so in those 4 regions, London, Birmingham, Portsmouth and Hastings. And we have a really wide range of subjects that you can train to teach in. So whether that's primary or science, maths, computing, English, history, RE, music, geography, history. We've got a really broad range of subjects that you can train to teach in for secondary schools as well. And you'd be starting in the school in September. So this is to start in September 2022, so starting this year. With that, you get a lot of support on the programme. As I said, we've been rated outstanding by Ofsted, and that's primarily due to the support that you get on the programme, because we realise that it is an intensive year. And we've got year 1 here, which is because at the end of your first year, you'll get your qualified teacher status and your PGCE. So at the end of the first year, you would be a qualified teacher, and you can then stay on to the early careers teacher programme that we run. And that just means you continue to get support and training for the next 2 years when you're a new teacher. But what year 1 looks like for you is that you would firstly have, before you start in September, and I'll go through kind of the recruitment process and what that looks like at the end. But if you are successful and you're going to be joining the programme in September, you would do a school orientation, which is where you'd spend a week in the school getting to know the systems, the logistics, meeting staff, the community, students. So you get a week before you start in September, so you're used to the school. Then you'd also have our 2-week virtual summer school. And this is really to prepare you for starting in the school. So you get a lot of training. We do a lot of practice, and I'm sure that Tania will talk about that a little bit later as well. So we do a lot of practice, so you feel really confident and comfortable when you do start going into the school in September, because you would be based there 5 days a week. So it's kind of learning on the job. You're working at the same time as you're getting your qualified teacher status and your PGCE. But you'd have your own tutor and you'd meet them within the summer school, and you'd have that really rigorous 2-week training before you start in the September. So our summer school happens in August. Then you can see we've got a lot of weekly things that happen. So you have weekly coaching, weekly co-planning, and weekly training sessions. The coaching is that you'll have a coach within the Ark Teacher Training team, but also within your school as well. And they'll come and observe some of your lessons. They'll give you feedback on those lessons. You'll reflect together on what you think went well, what you would do differently to improve it next time. But you'll have weekly coaching sessions to improve your practice. As well as that, you'll also have weekly co-planning, so they'll help you plan your lessons, because we realise that that's quite a big task if you don't know how to plan your lessons. We want to make sure that they're really effective for the students as well. So you'll have help planning your lessons. and you'll also have weekly training sessions, so one afternoon a week. It could be on subject-specific studies, it could be on pedagogy, it could be on kind of the climate of the classroom. That's something that people really worry about, is kind of how to control a classroom, and we give you really tangible kind of tips and processes to follow so that you're really confident with that. But you'll also have throughout your whole training year weekly training sessions as well, that will be run by the Ark Teacher Training team. So you've got that support network, as well as the rest of your cohort will also join. And there's around about 150 trainees that would be joining us in September this year. So yeah, that's the weekly side. Then you've got complementary placements. So what that means is we want to make sure that you're getting a really broad range of experience in lots of different schools. So you would do a second school experience where you'd spend kind of 7 or 15 days working in a different school so that you can learn more about them, share best practice, and then you'd also have 2 placement days where you would be going to a totally different setting, so an alternate phase. So it could be a SEN department, it could be a pupil referral unit, it could be with a primary or secondary, depending what school you're currently based in. But you have those placements so you can really experience kind of wider than just your school, and take kind of best practice and share tips with other trainees and other teachers in different schools. And then finally, at the end of that first year, that's when you get your PGCE and your qualified teacher status as well. And that's when you progress onto the early careers teacher program. So yes, that would be, you're a qualified teacher at the end of the first year, and then you can continue on to keep getting support. Then like I said, if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box and we'll come through to them at the end. So thank you for those that have popped your questions there already. And if anyone does have any questions, feel free to pop them in the questions chat box there, especially because funding sometimes gets a lot of questions. So there are 2 different funding routes that you can go down. This slide focuses on the bursary options because the majority of our places are bursary spaces, but we do have some salaried places available, but you usually have to have 2 to 3 years work experience to qualify for those salaried places, and they are really, really limited. So we would always say to kind of see whether you could consider the bursary options as well, which I'm going to run through now. So for maths, computing, physics and chemistry, there are bursaries available from the government as long as you've got a 2-2 or above at your degree, and they're £24,000. You don't need to apply for those. There's a kind of website, DFE apply, that you would need to kind of go on once you've been offered a place on the Ark Teacher Training program, and that's kind of all automatically done, and that's how your bursary is arranged through that. But you can also apply for scholarships for those subjects where you would get £26,000, so an extra £2,000 there for kind of the STEM subjects, and that's because we are really short and struggling on these subjects, so the bursaries are kind of stronger there. Then you've got geography and languages. So for languages in Ark schools, we do French and Spanish, and the bursary available there is 15,000. For biology, it's 10,000, and unfortunately for other subjects, so things like English, history, primary, RE, music, there aren't any bursaries available. With these, you would need to pay your tuition fee, so that's £9,250 tuition fee, just for the first year, so kind of the same as at university, but there are student loans and kind of things that can help out with that. Like I said, there are some salaried places available, but they are really, really limited. So I would always encourage you to have a look and see if you could consider the bursary option as well. With that, just a couple of questions that kind of link into this. So with the bursaries, unfortunately, it's not available to international students. So you may want to kind of contact Get Into Teaching. If you just Google that, then there may be some kind of courses that you would be eligible to get the bursary, but I don't believe, unfortunately, international students would qualify for the bursary. But I'll pop my email address down at the end, and then you can always email us directly as well if you've got any more questions. With that, so the next ones are around Ark Teacher Training and what makes a great trainee teacher. So if you know you want to be a teacher, there's lots of different routes to go down to get into teaching. But with Ark Teacher Training, you're based in a school from September. And these are the qualities that we think make a really great trainee teacher. So you can see their resilience, and I think this is one that is sometimes really vastly overlooked, but it's so passionate. It's so important, sorry. So you're going to be getting a lot of feedback on the program. It's going to be really helpful, but some of it will be constructive, or quite a lot of it will be constructive. So you have to kind of remain positive and remain in that kind of can-do attitude. So resilience is really, really important, as well as a passion for your subject, a passion for working with young people, a passion for ARC's mission about working in lower socioeconomic areas. So it's really important that you kind of love the subject that you want to teach, which is why we usually say that you have to have either a degree or an A level or equivalent in the subject that you want to teach. An eagerness to learn. You're going to be learning a lot. You need that natural curiosity and enthusiasm, so that you can inspire students as well. And with that, the self-awareness that goes with that, because you are going to be reflecting a lot on your practice and the lessons that you've delivered. So that's really crucial to make sure that you're the best teacher that you can be. Then finally, excellent communication kind of goes without saying. To be a teacher, it's more than just kind of written and verbal communication. Your communication style, you'll need to adjust it to who you're speaking to, and it can be the difference between kind of a class that really listens and pays attention, and maybe a class that isn't quite so focused on the lesson. Uh, and finally, compassion. I think it's important for everyone to have compassion, but especially for teachers. And that's compassion for yourself. So being kind to yourself when you make mistakes, because you will make mistakes with teaching, but also with students, staff, like the wider community as well. So those are the things that we think make a great trainee teacher. So finally, we've just got some kind of 5 top tips, and then I'll invite Tania, and we can run through some of the questions that I know are popping up as well. So thank you for putting those questions in there. 5 top tips for anyone thinking of teacher training and what to do with their application and how to get it to be noticed. So firstly, kind of gaining experience in, if you can, and that doesn't have to be in a school setting. It could be kind of extracurricular, could be helping at, I don't know, brownies or guitar lessons or something where you're working with young people, so that you can see, so that we can see that passion and that motivation for students. Broadening your knowledge. So with regards to kind of broadening your knowledge, that can cover a really wide range of things, including your subject as well. So looking at the TES website, the Department for Education, Bite Size, which is really useful for the curriculum, looking through the news so you can see kind of what's happening in the education, in education policy in the department, and just kind of being really knowledgeable about the education sector itself. With exploring your subject options, so we say that you have to have either a degree or an A level in the subject that you want to teach, but you have to be passionate about it. So it's no good having an A level in, English if actually you didn't enjoy it, you didn't enjoy English. You've got to go with your gut and where your passion lies. But it is worth kind of exploring your options available. Then we've got learning about Ark Teacher Training, kind of goes without saying, but learning about our ethos, our mission, the schools, where we're based, so that you can talk really fluidly and well about that in your interview, and also your application in general, kind of being positive, telling us about why you want to teach. So popping on your CV kind of a short paragraph about why it is that you want to become a teacher. With our application, we also have a section that you can have the opportunity to tell us about any experience that you do have working with young people. And finally, spelling and grammar, because nothing is worse than someone who's got loads of amazing experience and but their spelling and grammar just on their CV is not that strong. So make sure that you read that before. Then finally, so just if you do want to apply to Ark Teacher Training, excellent. This is the way that you do it. So you would go onto our website, and I'm sure we'll send that around afterwards, just to fill in a short eligibility form to make sure that you are eligible for the program, because as I said earlier, you do have to meet kind of certain criteria. Then you may be invited just to complete a short video, just so that we can learn a little bit more about you, why you're interested in teaching, what it is about teaching that inspires you. So that's just kind of learning a little bit more about you. Then you'd be invited to, or hopefully be invited to, an interview with us that is virtual with 2 panelists, and we ask you to prepare kind of a 5-minute presentation, and then there's around about half an hour competency interview. And then finally, we have a virtual school-led interview as well, which is where you get the opportunity to teach a short lesson to our panel, get given some feedback and think about how you want to implement that feedback into your lesson. And again, have kind of around about half an hour competency interview with that as well. And that's with one of our school leaders, as well as the recruitment team and one of the tutors that you could be matched with on the programme. So you can find all that information on our website in more detail as well. But otherwise, I think now we will invite Tania in to come and say hello and answer any questions that you may have about the teacher training program. I am Tania. Do you just want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about who you are and where you're working?
Hi guys, so my name is Tania, and I'm currently working in school in Enfield, and I teach year 5, so two classes really because of the school structure. So I've been based in year 5.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I'm just going to go through some of the questions that we've got on the question tab, because I think we've got a few available there. So I am going to try and group them together as much as I can. So firstly, kind of the eligibility side of it. So we have, can a holder of postgraduate be eligible? So yeah, if you've got a postgraduate degree, then you can be eligible for the Ark Teacher Training program and to teach in the you normally do have to have a degree as like an undergraduate degree as well as a postgraduate degree, but it would depend on kind of what degree you have. So what we can do afterwards is I can drop our email address in, because for some of the more kind of specific questions, it might be that we take those kind of offline. But yes, if you've got a postgraduate degree, you can be eligible. And with that, so the right to live and work, so we've got our training year that is 1 year, and then we have our early careers teacher program, which is kind of 2 years after that. So we would usually look for someone to be able to live and work in the UK for 3 years. So it would be 3 years usually that we would need your right to work. If you have a settled status from the EU, I think you would be eligible for the bursary there. It's kind of the same as student finance. So if you're eligible for student finance, then you'd be eligible for the bursary as well. But if you've got settled status, then I believe you should be eligible for the bursary as well. I think we will come to Tania, and then we'll kind of loop back to some of the questions as well. So, Tania, do you want to tell us, well, what kind of, I know you had the advantage of kind of being based in one of our schools before you started the teacher training program. So can you tell us a little bit about why you even started working in a school? What was it about kind of working in a school that appealed to you?
Great question. So I'd always worked with children and was really inquisitive in nature, just as an adult as well, wanting to learn all the time. And lockdown came, COVID story. So I decided I hadn't got work, and I was working at an outdoor adventure place and teaching children with team building and games and things. And I thought, School would be kind of cool to work in. I've never tried it before, and I think this is where the experience coming into your application comes in really handy, because I wanted to try it first to make sure I definitely liked it. So then I came as a graduate teaching assistant, did some cover lessons, did a little bit of teaching, and then realized I love it. I definitely want to apply to teacher training, and then kind of the rest is history. But yeah, just making a difference in their lives, you know.
Excellent. And I think, yeah, that's that you don't have to have worked in a school or in kind of an ARC school before you apply to the teacher training program. But I think, yeah, like you said, if you're not quite sure, sometimes it's a good avenue to kind of go down, just to make sure it's definitely for you first. But yeah, it's not, you don't have to have experience kind of working in a school prior to the ARC teacher training program. I think Abigail has asked a question about how did you find work experience before applying to train to teach? Are you happy to answer that one, Tania?
Yeah, well, if you're thinking about schools, I'm not sure I have too much advice in terms of schools, because I didn't manage to get any work experience within an actual school. But I did do, as Laura mentioned before, I did do a lot of brownie stuff, like so volunteering at youth groups, volunteering if there's something that you're kind of passionate about. It might be tutoring, maybe, helping children. I'm trying to think what other things I did. I volunteered for like the RSPB, running nature groups with children. What else was there on my application? Yeah, just like
I think,
brownies and teaching swimming. I think I taught swimming a bit.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think any way that you can get kind of some experience with young people is really valuable for your application, because it just shows that passion. But also it gives you examples of what you can talk about in interview as well, which is always really useful. Um, And so thinking about the teacher training program, so you get your qualified teacher status and your PGCE at the end of it. And we work with Goldsmiths University for our PGCE. So I think Ayla was asking, are there any exams, lectures, or assignments with this course? Or is it mainly practical learning in schools? Do you want to take that one, Tanya?
Yeah, so there's a bit of a mixture. So in the actual school scenario for your QTS, which is through ARC, you have to do some assignments. There's two, we call them formative assessments, and that's where you take maths one time and English another time, and you create a scheme of work, and you really dive into all the learning objectives and what they need to know from the curriculum and things, and you are graded on that. And by the end of it, they give you loads of feedback. It is formal, but you have to have ticked off all of the things that you need to know, and you do your first one in maths, then they give you loads of constructive feedback, and then you do your second one in English, and then combined you kind of tick off all the requirements. In terms of other assessments in school, you have, it's not really assessment, but just ongoing as part of your training, as well as assessing where you are at the time, you have 3 observations every term. So you have one from your ARC tutor from ATT Central, and then you have one from your mentor, and then one from your ATT lead. So you have 3, and they mark you against a rubric of all of the things that you should show by the end of your teaching year. So then you can see like where your progress is, and then those will also give your coach ideas as what your weekly step will be. So then you'll work on specific things. So over time, your rubric of what they highlight of all of the qualities that you have of a good teacher gets greater each time you do one. And then what else in school? In school, we also have lectures. So we have ATT training on a Thursday, which is kind of like a lecture, but it's much more interactive, kind of like a seminar, I think we used to call them at uni. So then you have that every Thursday, and there's usually some prep you have to do beforehand. It's not marked, but you have to do it. So, and the more time you put into it, the more you get out of it, to be honest, because sometimes it can be a bit rushed and it doesn't go as well. So you do that each week. And then for Goldsmiths, which is separate, which is just your PGCE, you have 2 5,000 word assignments. You have months to do them, and they give you, I think, 2 lectures and a tutorial to help you through that.
Brilliant. Excellent. And I think, yeah, you do have a lot of time to kind of work on those assignments, and a lot of support as well. So it's not something to be kind of daunted by, but yeah, it there are things to be doing, things to be done, I'm sure. So Tania, do you want to talk about kind of what your typical, I know a typical day as a teacher is
Yeah.
like an impossible challenge, but chat us through a random day. What do you get up to every day?
So I would say there's probably two typical days. There's a typical day where I'm teaching alone, and there's a typical day when I'm getting some kind of coaching or feedback. So on a general day when I'm teaching alone, kind of looks like a normal teacher day. Come in, make sure everything's prepared in the morning, get coffee. Then the children come in at 8:40. So sometimes I have about 40 minutes, maybe do some marking. English books seems to take forever to mark. Then kids come in, I'm with them for the whole morning. I have a 15-minute break whilst they go out to their playtime with the teaching assistants. And just so that you guys are aware, I told you I'm in year 5, but primaries, I'm not sure how it works in secondary. And then at lunchtime, we all eat together in the dining hall. So family style dining, I think is good because it just gives you a chance to build relationships with the children. So I'd always recommend eating with the children if you can. And then I have about half an hour. So sometimes I'll relax and talk with the other teachers. Sometimes you need to. Other times I'll go back to the classroom and mark some books or do something that needs to be doing. End of the day, 3:25, 3:30. After the day's done, if sometimes we have a few meetings, but generally not really many. And then again, just marking or preparing. I'm sure there's bound to be a question about planning, and sometimes I'll get a bit of planning done before and after school, just because as I'm training, I feel like the planning takes a bit longer than hopefully in next year or the year after speeds up a little bit. And then it looks basically exactly the same if I'm being trained that day. I might have team teaching, in which case there'll be an experienced teacher with me and they would have already had the lesson, and they'll probably use a mini whiteboard to give me advice as I'm teaching, just to improve my practice live, really. So it doesn't really take, it's not much extra stuff.
Brilliant. And I think, yeah, it's definitely always great if you can kind of form those relationships with the students, and like you said, simple things like eating lunch with them really makes a big difference as well. And it kind of links in, we've had a question from Hora about sorry, I've lost the thing, about why did you choose Ark Teacher Training over other teaching routes? And I think that's a great question. There's a lot of different teacher training providers out there. What was it about kind of Ark that appealed to you? Why did you decide Ark over other providers?
That's a really good question, and there's probably a few different things, some perfect answers, some probably not perfect answers, sorry Laura, but they're focused in London and on the people who need it the most in terms of where the educational disparity is. So that was like a huge thing, because I think if you're working, whether it be a school or an organization, you kind of have to believe in what they stand for. And because I believed in what ARC stood for, that was why they were on the list. And then I did look at like provider rankings and like which ones were good, which ones weren't so great, reviews and things like that. And ARC was kind of in the top of the list. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. There's this document online, I think it's really old now, like 2017. And like ARC features really high on the training providers. So I did kind of filter through on which ones had a good reputation as well. But mostly because of what they stood for and their reputation. Yeah.
Brilliant. And I think, yeah, with the teacher training program, so Tania, I know you were based in school before, but for people that haven't been based in school before, and people that have, I think a key part of the program is that you'll start on quite a low timetable. So you won't start any higher than kind of 50% of your independent kind of teaching timetable. And then as you get more confident across the terms, that's when the hours that you do independent teaching will increase. So your hours kind of increase as your confidence grows. So I think that's a really important factor, and that support and kind of mental health and well-being is really important, and something that I think, especially with teaching, Tania, I'm sure you can talk about this as well, but I think it's something that people do worry about. So having, you know, people that you can turn to for support, and I think there's a lot of avenues for support on the program, is yeah, a really key feature of it as well. I don't know whether you had any more to add on that, Tanya, or if we want to move
Yeah,
on to the next one.
I don't think I ever thought about, I did think about what I wanted my teacher training to look like in terms of schools. And I did want to be based in one school because I think those relationships with children, for me personally, is one of my strongest points as a teacher, because it just means I can understand them and know them and teach them well. So I didn't want to move around from school to school. And I know that some programs, even when they're kind of on the job programs, do move you around to different places. So that was one of the things. And I didn't really think too much about the structure of who can help you. But having been in Ark Teacher Training now, there is honestly so many people of so many different levels that can help you that I couldn't recommend it more. Yeah.
Brilliant. And with that, so we normally have around about 100, 150 trainees kind of on the programme at the same time. Emily's just asked quite a relevant linked question. Are there any opportunities to connect with other trainee teachers on the programme? Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I think it looks a bit different now because of COVID. So this year we have lots of online tutorials where we get to have a bit of a relationship with them. Ark also, we have a social rep that will organise things for us. And then once every, I don't even know if I know roughly, but maybe every month and a half, we have an in-person training. And then after that, we always go on a social. So there is opportunity, and within schools as well. Well, I'm linked to a secondary school, so we have a good relationship between the teacher trainer, the trainee teachers, and the ECT teachers. So we all have a group chat and kind of like communicate, bounce off each other, go out for a meal after school and stuff. I would say, so there is opportunity, but some of that does come off your own back a little bit, because if you want to get involved in it, it's there. But if you choose not to, then you obviously don't have to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think there's normally, especially with secondary anyway, I know you're based in primary, but in secondary, there's usually at least kind of 3 trainees, I would say, in the majority of the ARC schools. Primary is slightly different because they're smaller, so they don't have kind of or they may not have the capacity to take the same number. But it does depend on the school, because I think are there 3 of you currently in your primary?
Yeah.
So, but I know that we've also got other ARC primary schools where there's just one trainee based in there because of kind of the size of the school. So it does vary. But I think, yeah, you'll always be seeing kind of your cohort and other trainees with the weekly training, whether that's virtually or in person. Brilliant. Let me just have a look through and see whether there's any other questions. But do you want to chat us through, while I do that, kind of a highlight that you've had from teaching?
Highlight. I would say, if I think about one of the things that I was most surprised with, it was the fact that I had an effect on the children immediately, because I didn't know if I'd be taking a back seat and kind of, observing a lot. But I guess my highlight is being really involved in the teaching, and even this year being able to say that I contributed to like these children's learning outcomes, which was a really nice, pleasant surprise. I don't know, some of you might be thinking that you're going straight into doing that, but I just didn't expect to be so hands-on, which is really, really nice. And I think the other thing is the trust with the children, because you suddenly realize you're a safe adult in these children's lives, and to when you actually experience it and people coming to you with problems, or maybe they're disclosing something to you, it's a really privileged position to be in, and it's almost humbling, because you get to help on so many levels. So yeah.
Great. And have you kind of, what challenges have you faced with training to teach?
Challenges, I think, things that I found hard at first, behaviour a little bit. Summer school sets you up really well for behaviour management. They teach you all of these techniques that you practice in front of a camera, hopefully in person on the next training year, not sure. And you feel a bit silly sometimes, but it comes in so handy. So behaviour challenging. And then also the other challenge, I thought that now it's not so much of a challenge. It's just managing other adults in your room, like making sure that they're prepared for the lessons and that you've given them enough time to do stuff. Because as a trainee, sometimes you're rushed off your feet and you're a little bit behind, and you're thinking like, oh, I've got this lesson to do, and you've kind of got yourself prepared, and you almost haven't had time to prepare the other people that need to be prepared. So that was like a work in progress that I found challenging. But then it's really rewarding once you prepare your TA really well, or your one-to-one in your classroom. Then you think, oh wow, like it does make a huge difference. So then it becomes to be a bit more of a priority.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think having those other kind of supportive adults in your classroom, and kind of learning what the best way to work together is all part of the journey, isn't it? So excellent. Brilliant. I think we've got a few more questions that I can just run through. I think they're more potentially around funding, so they might be kind of more aimed for me. But if anyone does have any questions for Tania about, well, anything to do with teaching, then feel free to add them to the chat. But otherwise, I will just run through some of the questions that we've had. So a couple of questions about bursaries and kind of how that works. So with that, there aren't any bursary, or the bursaries aren't specific for kind of lower household incomes. It's kind of, the household income is irrelevant. It's all based on your degree. So as long as you've got a 2-2 or more at your degree and your subject is eligible to get a bursary, so things like STEM, languages, geography, biology, kind of those subjects, they're all eligible for bursaries. Then it's not based on your household income. So that's not taken into consideration with the teacher training bursaries, just because it's more about kind of getting those people in the subjects that we really need to teach. And that's all decided by the Department for Education. So that's kind of separate to the Ark Teacher Training programme. We've got, is it possible to do the 1-year training without proceeding with the early years training for now, and to come back for the remaining 2 years some other time? So I think we usually, or probably the majority, 95% of our trainees would stay for their 1-year training and then would go straight onto the early years program. Would go straight onto the early careers teacher program for those 2 years afterwards. If I'm being honest, I don't know anyone that's kind of done the 1 year and then come back to do the 2 years. But it's always something that we can kind of explore. I would say it would probably be the most likely that would be an option for the subjects that are more difficult to fill, so kind of physics and maths, because it's not our standard. But I can pop in at the end, I will pop in our email address, and you can always email over any specific questions. But I don't think that it would be, it's not something we've done before, so I don't think it would be. But feel free to send over an email. With that, so I graduated in health and social care. Can I apply for this training? So if your health and social care is a degree, so if it's a degree with honours, so usually kind of 3 years that you would have spent doing that, then yes, but it is set by the Department for Education that you have to have your degree. So if it's a degree, then yes, you are eligible. So with regards to subjects, we don't have kind of health and social care as one of our options. So it would probably be either primary, or if you studied A level or equivalent, kind of whatever you studied at A level, you'd also be able to look at the subjects there and see whether those are any subjects that you'd be interested in teaching. So how long is the whole process? So you've got your year training, so 1-year training, and then you've got 2 years as an early careers teacher. So altogether kind of 3 years, but you're qualified at the end of your first year. Brilliant. I think that's all of the questions. So if anyone has any other questions for me or Tania, then feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll just give it a couple of minutes. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining. It was great to have all your questions. So thank you very much for firing those over, and do feel free. We've still got a few minutes, so if you've got any questions, pop them over. Tania, we've just had a question about where the lectures happen. So we don't have lectures, so you'll be based in the school kind of every day, working with the students every day. So it's basically yeah, you're working in a school. But the training that you have, do you want to talk a little bit, Tania, about kind of where your training happens?
Sure. It's so our lectures, if you mean for the PGCE, which we get a couple for, this year they've happened online. I do not know if they've ever happened in person, but they work really well online, and the Goldsmiths have a virtual learning environment online, and they record all of the lectures, and I've gone back and watched them several times, so it's actually quite nice that they are online. And then your like seminars, almost, if you want to call it that, with Ark Teacher Training, they happen again online, and depending on your school schedule, the 3 trainees here, we all go home at lunchtime, and so we're at home when we do those trainings online, or when they are in person, like this Thursday they're in person, and we go to Ark Burlington Danes in London. So if you're based in Hastings, Portsmouth, where's the other place? Hastings, Portsmouth,
Birmingham.
Birmingham. Then you come to London for the training. And I believe Ark pay for the travel.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, when I did, if you guys want to know, I did my placement in an alternative place. So I went down to Portsmouth for my 3-week placement at an alternative school, which I found really exciting, because I didn't want to be placed in a school that was really similar to the one that I was already in, or had a similar demographic of people. I just wanted a completely different experience. So then I went down there. So I think that was also quite nice, working with a network that has different locations, because you can go to a different city and just experience a completely different type of school.
Yeah, and I think you have hit a good point there. And someone's asked why are we different? And I think a big part of that is that because we are a network of schools, we work as a network, and with that, that's great for your future career prospects. So it could be that, there's no, say you're looking for a head of department, or a different role that's not available in your school, but actually there's one 10 minutes down the road that has a role that you're interested in. So I think it's got that progression, that it's not just within your school. You can look within the whole network for your future career, which I think is really really important. So you've got that kind of network element. You've got, with Ark Teacher Training, you can pick the area that you want to be based in. So we won't send you to different areas that you don't want to be based in. So if you say that you want to be based in London, we'll place you in London. As well, I think it is really about kind of the practice and the support. And I think we've had a question about how is Ark different from Teach First. So Tania, I don't know whether you want to talk a little bit about that, or if you'd like me to.
I don't mind. I think Teach First, you correct me if I'm wrong, Laura. I think Teach First, you basically go in as the class teacher, like from day one. So you kind of, not completely full load, but basically full load from day one. Whereas Arc, really nicely, it gives you a good amount of things to get going with in the beginning, and it doesn't overload you. So you can really get those fundamentals down, and the whole first term, really, or half term at least, really focuses on behavior, because if without the behavior in the classroom, like everything else is undermined. So it affords you the opportunity to focus on something that's fundamental, and then slowly adds on. And it adds on, not slow, but it adds on enough that you can cope with it. But yet, if there is an issue and for some reason you can't cope, then there's the systems to help you deal with whatever it is you're going through. But I like the fact that it leads you up to it, but it doesn't take anything away. You get to the same end point, but potentially with a little less stress, I think.
Yeah, I would say that that's probably the main difference, is that you start on a lower timetable, whereas with Teach First, I think you start on kind of 80% of a full timetable, whereas with Arc, you'll start on kind of, if you're an external candidate, like 50% maximum of a independent teaching load. So you start a lot a lot lower, so that you can get confident, because it's going to take you longer to plan your lessons and to mark and all of those things. So it kind of gives you more time to do that. And as well, with I think we've spoken about kind of the differences with Teach First. The main difference with doing a PGCE at a university and doing it with Ark Teacher Training is that with Ark Teacher Training, you'd be based in a school 5 days a week. So you get your qualified teacher status, you get your PGCE, but you're working in the school every day. Whereas with a university PGCE, you're kind of going into your lectures every day, and then you normally do like a placement out. So it's just how much time you're actually spending in schools and with the students. So I would say that's the main difference with a university PGCE, where you're based at the university and doing placements out, and with Ark Teacher Training, you're based in the schools. So you're kind of learning on the job, learning as you go. Whereas with university, you're learning in the lecture style and then kind of putting it into practice. Whereas with Ark, you get to use it literally the next day. So brilliant. I think then we have answered everything. So I'm just skim reading through. What I will do is I will just pop in our email address. So it's teacher training at arkonline.org. So with that, I will, sorry. There we go. I've had to kind of send it as a question, but also I am sure that we'll share our details around after this webinar. So if you do have any other questions, or if I have missed one, because it's very possible that I've missed one, apologies if so. So if you do have any other questions, then you can just contact us, and we'll send an email around just with a little bit more information. If you did want to apply, you can apply directly on our website. So if you just Google Ark Teacher Training, but also we'll send you some more details. But Ark Teacher Training, our applications are kind of closing at the end of May. So if you do want to apply for this September, I just encourage you to apply kind of as soon as you can. So yeah, have a look on our Ark Teacher Training website. But otherwise, I think that's everything. So thank you so much for joining us all today. It was lovely to kind of answer all the questions. Thank you for being so proactive and asking lots of questions. Makes it much more engaging rather than me just asking Tania lots of questions as well. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us today, and have a good rest of your day. And thank you very much, Tania, for talking about your experiences as well.
You're very welcome.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, have a good day, everyone. And yeah, thank you for joining.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.